In this video, we're going to do an introduction to Azure Active Directory. Now, there's so much possible in Azure AD that there's no way that I could possibly cover the entire thing in one video, but we should be able to cover the majority of what's going to be the most important to us, at least for right now. So first off, Azure Active Directory is identity and authentication. Basically, that's what we utilize out on the internet is who am I? So who am I? What's my identity? And confirm that, authenticate me. As opposed to standard Windows Active Directory, which has group policy and lots of other features, that is not included in Azure Active Directory. Azure AD can be integrated with Windows AD, so that means that if you have an existing Windows AD environment, you can just tie right into it. Along with that, it has some amazing cross-organization federation capabilities. This is what's called single sign-on features. Allows you just to simply log into one place and then everywhere else you go, it automatically authenticates you. And above and beyond that, it easily allows us to have multi-factor authentication. Easily tying into your cell phone or some other multi-factor authentication tools, such as the little dongles that have numbers that change frequently. These multi-factor authentication features are built right into Azure AD, so you don't have to try to reinvent the wheel to try to make it work for your environment. Now we compare that to Windows Active Directory, which has the domain services. That's your authentication, your users and your authentication. Azure Active Directory certificate services allows you to do SSL and other types of certificates in your environment. Federation services, lightweight directory management services, rights management, and group policies. The only things that are available through Azure AD is this AD domain services and federation services, and it actually does this on steroids. It does it much better than you do it yourself. Having set up Active Directory Federation services in several companies, the way Azure does it is definitely significantly better. So Azure AD is not necessarily an AD replacement and is complementary to is a complementary service. It can replace all of Azure AD, but there's a lot of situations where you can replace all of Windows AD, but there's a lot of situations where you don't want that. Yeah. A couple of different versions. There is the free version of Azure Active Directory, and if I remember correctly, this allows up to 5,000 objects. Whatever an object in Active Directory is, if you have 50 people or less in your environment, I doubt you're going to be exceeding 5,000. So the free version would probably work well for you. There's also a basic and premium version which allow for higher numbers as well as a lot of security aspects to it. And I am definitely one for hiring somebody who knows exactly what they're doing. If I have a leaky pipe, I call up a plumber because the plumber knows how to do it and can do it better and faster than I can. Azure Active Directory has security experts who know security better and much faster than I do. So therefore, the security aspects of those premium features are definitely worth it. Authentication options. So we can do cloud-only authentication. We can create users who exist only in the cloud. If I'm a brand new company starting out and I don't have any servers in my environment, that might be what I would go for. If, however, I'm synchronizing to Azure AD, I may do some sort of a password hash synchronization so that when they log in locally, they can then access cloud resources at the same time. Instead of hash synchronization, maybe I want to do some form of seamless single sign-on, pass-through, or federated authentication. Of all of these, this password hash is probably the easiest one to set up. So creating a directory. Well, let's go ahead and let's log into an Azure environment and let's create a directory. So I have a sandbox here, and I'm just going to go ahead and create resource. And I believe I have to choose over here on the left-hand side, identity, and then Azure Active Directory. Here it allows me to choose my organization name. Let's call this ECG Test. And whatever my initial domain name is, maybe I own the domain ecgtest.com. So my initial domain here will just simply be ecgtest.onmicrosoft.com. I can change that later, but for right now, we'll leave it at that. Say OK for the initial creation to take effect. And it's literally just that simple. I'm just creating Azure AD at this point, and it's currently in the free version because I'm not utilizing any of the advanced features. All right, so we'll let that go. Speaking of some of the advanced features, so we just, our domain is actually creating right now. We can, once we get in there, there is an add custom domain option right here under custom domains. If you have ever set up a domain in a web service of some sort, what you can do is you can go in and you can say, yes, this right here, I own forcoffee.com. And it says, okay, that's great. We are currently listing you as unverified. What you can do is you can come in here and you can verify it by customizing your DNS. Basically, they're saying, hey, right here, create a text record, a TXT record, and call it this with this content in it. And then what happens is when you go ahead and click verify down here, they will go out there on the internet and they will confirm, do you own contoso.com? So they will query contoso.com for that record with that detail, and if it is correct, then they say, yes, okay, it looks like you actually do own contoso.com or ecgtest.com or forcoffees.com or whatever other sites you might possibly want. Let's see if our domain is done. Yes. All right. Click here to manage your new directory. So like I was just saying, if we wanted to put a custom domain in there, let's see, custom domain names. Go ahead and add custom domain, and I said ecgtest.com. Say add, and then it says, okay, go ahead and do some DNS records in order to prove it. Prove that you own this domain name. This is what stops me from saying that I own Microsoft.com or I own Apple.com. Yeah. All right, so let's go back to Azure Active Directory. So at this point, I have all of my standard Azure Active Directory features. For instance, I can create users. Let's go and create a new user. Create user, sure. Joe Smith, sure. His name is Joe Smith. That's interesting. So Joe Smith, he can automatically create a password. I can then they show it to me, copy to the clipboard, and create. I then send Joe an email saying, hey, here's your new password. So that's new users. Again, if I had only a handful of users, say 20 or less, I probably would do my environment similar to this. I could also do a guest user. Say I have a contractor coming into my organization and that contractor needs access to my environment. I don't necessarily want to create a brand new account for that contractor because the contractor probably already has an Azure account already. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say invite user. And then what I can do is I can go ahead and invite them at guest.com. Go ahead and invite them via their email address. put in some sort of a personalized message, specify their groups, roles, and so on, and then click invite. What happens is they would then see in their email, hey, you've been invited to the ECG test domain. Click here to log in. They then have access to my domain in whatever format I have defined them. I'm not going to click invite because I don't know if that domain actually exists. So that was users. We can do the same thing with groups. Go ahead and create groups. This would be a test, type security. Let's call this test group. And then we can go ahead and assign who owns this. I own that, sure. Who are the members? Don't know who that is. Let's find Joe. There we go. Joe is a user. Let's remove that Azure service. And there we go. So we created a group, and we added our user into it. So from general authentication issues, or authentication aspects, it is literally a piece of cake. If I wanted to delete this group, I'm sorry, not this group, but this domain, things can become a little tricky. You see the delete directory button right here, but sometimes that starts freaking out and it does all of these checks and it says, hey, you've got users here. You have to delete all the users in your domain before you do it. Your account specifically, to click on that, your account specifically does not have permissions to delete this domain. So click here to go ahead and give yourself domain permissions. If you have any multi-factor or other AD settings set up, as well as linked applications, you have to resolve all of those one step at a time. Kind of make sure that all of your ducks are in a row before you start deleting things, but can become problematic if you're not quite sure what you're doing. All right, so let's see. That's deleting a directory. Yes, you'll see a lot of error messages such as that and that. All right, integrating on premises with Active Directory. This is where kind of the rubber meets the road. We have an existing Azure Active Directory. We have an existing Windows Active Directory domain. We want to now benefit from having the Azure Active Directory features, and so we want to use a tool called Azure AD Connect. And in order to do that, we come up to our domain here, and we find our Azure AD Connect. And it says, great, just go ahead and download this tool, and we'll go ahead and run that. So that actually goes to a download page, and I have a second machine here that is actually running an Active Directory environment. So let me go ahead and bring him up. So in this Active Directory environment, I went ahead and I created a lot of users. I found this webpage, 365lab.net. They have a create random test users in a domain with PowerShell. Through here, I've gone ahead and I've created in my test users OU about 400 different users. And I want to synchronize all of these people with Azure. So in order to do that, I'm copying from my other screen the download URL for our Azure Active AD Connect. So microsoft.com/en-us/download/details.aspx ID equals 47594. That didn't work. Try that again. Microsoft.com/en-us/download/details.aspx 47594. There we go. That still didn't work. All right, let's search for it. Azure Active Directory AD Connect download. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that. And then run it. Apparently I clicked it twice. All right, we'll get rid of that second one there. All right, so agree to the licenses. You definitely read through all that, right? Yeah. There are some customized settings. We can go through here and we can specify our custom install locations. Not gonna do all that because I think the express settings work pretty well. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use the express settings. This will go ahead and install Active Directory for my environment. It asks me for an Azure AD global admin credentials. I'm actually going to create an Azure AD global admin specifically for this synchronization. So in my AD domain, users, I'm going to go ahead and create a new user, and let's call this AD Connect. AD Connect. I'm going to say, let me choose a password. Let's see if it will let me do password 0123. Groups. I don't need it to be any groups, but the roles, I do want to specify the role, and that should be all right. I gotta go back to my thing here. Azure AD Global Administrator. All right, so I want to look for a global administrator. Global administrator, there we go. So this user, AD Connect at ecgtest.onmicrosoft.com, is now the global administrator or a global administrator for the environment. So now I come back to AD Connect. So AD Connect at ecgtest.onmicrosoft.com with password 0123, and next. Username or typo. Always best practice to create a separate user for things like this. Password has expired. All right. Normally, the first time you log in, you have to, or the first time you create an account, you have to change the password. So portal.azure.com. It's AD Connect at ecgtest.onmicrosoft.com. There we go. Now it's requiring me to change my password. Hopefully it allows that. No, too easy of a password. That's one of the great things about Azure Active Directory is it will flat out tell you your password is too easy to guess. And won't let you use it. There we go. No. All right, so I only needed to log in just long enough in order to change the password. So at this point, I can go back to my virtual machine. There we go. And change the password. There we go. Now it's confirming that he is in there. And now I need to specify the local domain password and credentials. So for that, again, let's create a new account. Let's create a new test account. Let's see other users. new user, and let's just call this see, I called the other one AD Connect, so Windows AD. Sure. And in order to keep things simple, let's go ahead and give him the same password. Password never expires. There we go. And then this is ECG test. So what was my domain name? ecgtest.com, yeah. / Windows AD. And my password. Not a member of the Enterprise Admins Group. Okay, let's make him a member of the Enterprise Admins Group. Enterprise Admins. There we go. And now it says, hey, do you want to go ahead and migrate this? This Active Directory, or this UPN suffix, this domain name has not been verified by Active Directory. Therefore, all the users you migrate over will not have the correct UPN set. Because this is a lab environment and I'm doing it specifically to test, to demonstrate how it works, I'm going to click Continue. If you see this in a real world environment, verify your domain before you migrate. Or before you connect. So next, and then start synchronization when it finishes. So this will go ahead and configure the database, configure the connector, and then start synchronizing all of the users, the 400 plus users from my local domain up into Azure. And the cool thing is that means that every time I create a new user here on my local domain, it automatically is created up into Azure. Every time I delete a user, it's deleted from Azure. If I disable a user or change a password, those changes are reflected in Azure as well. So it's really great. It's an additional service that I don't have to worry about having 2 sets of passwords, 2 sets of users throughout my entire environment. Let's see. So some of the more advanced options with Azure AD Connect, and this is an older version. That's why the slide's a little bit different than what we just saw. These options are all still there, however. Password synchronization, that is the default. That's essentially what does a password hash on your Active Directory domain controller and then synchronizes that hash up into Azure Active Directory. You can do pass-through authentication, which passes the password, I believe, from the desktop up into Azure as well. Federate with ADFS. If you already have ADFS in your environment, possibly from having O365 set up, you can use ADFS in order to federate your accounts. Do not configure. That's probably a bad thing to choose. Kind of a waste of time at that point. And then enable single sign-on. Some operating systems, some web browsers, some applications will single sign-on from your desktop up into the cloud. Let's see. So while the synchronization is still running, let's talk about ADFS here really quick. ADFS, Active Directory Federated Services, works by utilizing what's called SAML, or Security Assertion Markup Language. I always like talking about this because it's a really cool technology. What happens is we've got a user down here, and the user wants to get to a web server, some sort of a cloud resource. Maybe it's your email, maybe it's some video streaming service, who knows. The user hasn't yet logged in, and what happens is the cloud service says, hey, I know who you are, I know where you're from this company, but I haven't confirmed who you are. So I'm going to send back some sort of a message that tells you, go get me a certificate, get me a token that tells me that you are who you are. My web browser will automatically redirect to my ADFS server. You may have seen this before if you're trying to get into your school or your corporate email. You tried to log into Outlook.com and instead it redirected you to some internal website from your company. So you request the token from there. Basically, you send it your username and password, and then it sends back an authenticated state. And then finally, a token is issued. Now, this cloud service already trusts your ADFS server. Your cloud service has been told, trust everything from this ADFS server. If I tell you that this is the Pope, believe that it's the Pope. And there's absolutely no questions beyond that point. So when this token comes down from the ADFS server, I can then send that directly to the cloud service. And the cloud service says, perfect, you're the Pope, or whoever you want to be. And I'm going to go ahead and grant you access. So ADFS works just that easily. Well, I say easily. If you've ever set it up, every single one of these steps can be tweaked and might need to be configured properly, but it does work just that simple. Once all of this is set up, this cloud service could be, cloud service 1, cloud service 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Once your infrastructure is set up, you can then branch out to 1,000 different cloud services, all using SAML, so that your end users only have one login request, or only one point to log in, which is through your own Active Directory domain controllers. So it's what's referred to as SSO, or single sign-on. Yeah, one username, one password, you get access to all your corporate resources. All right. Let's see how our synchronization is going. The configuration is complete. Now, if we look up into Azure AD and then refresh our user count here. Let's see, users. And there we go. All of our users are starting to log in, or starting to be able to log in. Currently, all of these users have passwords of password1. So in theory, I could log in as a Macon at ecgtest.onmicrosoft.com. Let's try that. I'm actually kind of curious to see if it will give me any errors. Let's try alicol, ALICOL at ecgtest.onmicrosoft.com. Password of password01. Password is incorrect. What was the password that I set then? Let's look at that script. Just password1. All right. And allowed me to log right in. Yay! Now, there's absolutely no resources that this user currently has access to, because I haven't set any resources up, and it was literally just a test user. That was the first time they'd ever logged in. All right, so synchronizing users. Along with synchronizing users, it also synchronizes all of the groups. I didn't have any groups created, so there's really none to migrate at this point. You will notice, however, that there is also a source column here, Windows Server AD as opposed to cloud. Same thing for users. Let's see, users. There is a column of the source, Windows AD as opposed to Azure AD. Helps you identify who's there. Let's see. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. All right, let's see what else we got. Adding users. Yep, piece of cake. Adding groups. Azure multi-factor authentication. All right. You promised me that there was multi-factor authentication in here, and it was significantly easier than I've ever done before. And it literally is. It is so easy to be able to set up multi-factor authentication in Azure Active Directory. If we come back here to Azure Active Directory, let's see, somewhere over here on the left-hand side, not mobility. Where am I missing it here? Is it under users? All right, got to find it here. It's app registrations. They have moved this around on me. Imagine that. User settings. No. All right, so they've moved it around on me. Let's see how we actually do this. MFA. Nope, search doesn't fit. All right, it is in here. I am just at a loss of exactly how to get to it because they've changed it since the last time I've seen it. Multi. That's just news. Yep. All right, well, I don't want to waste your time looking for it myself, but it is in here. And it is actually really easy for employees to enroll. So I'm really surprised that it's taking quite so long for me to find. Oh, well. We'll come back to multi-factor. So multi-factor authentication. Let's see, application gallery. All right. So it turns out that nowadays a lot of people don't necessarily run all their applications in-house. It used to be that if you needed an application, you went through and you built out dozens of servers in order to host that application. And it was a big, huge thing just to get one little app in your environment. Nowadays, however, with the cloud and with the internet, there are tons of cloud-based applications. Probably some of the most common ones are storage applications, such as Box.com or DocuSign. It's a very, very popular one that's used for signing of documents. There's tons of applications that are out there on the cloud. Why do I have to have them in-house when I could just point to them? And that is what Azure Active Directory allows us to do. As right here, it allows us to have enterprise applications. So under enterprise applications, we'll go ahead and say new. And it starts off by listing some of the most popular ones, such as Box, Concur, DocuSign, GitHub, and so on. Great thing about this, let's look at GitHub really quick. GitHub is used for storing source code in your environment. The cool thing here is when I sign up a user in my environment using the GitHub Enterprise application, they then log in with their AD credentials. So if I can log in with my AD credentials, that means I don't have to know a separate username and password. Bingo. That's awesome. I only have to know my normal username and password, and it gets me both in the domain as well as onto GitHub that I have to do all my work in. That also means when I change my account, change my password. Oh no, I have to change my password every 3 months. When I change my password, it then automatically changes to on GitHub. Password change. And then most importantly, in a lot of cases, is what do you do with disgruntled employees? I need to let somebody go, and I don't think they're going to be very happy about it. They currently have access to all of GitHub. How do I make sure that when HR is talking to them that they don't have access to GitHub anymore? Well, I just simply expire or disable their account in Active Directory. When I disable their account in Active Directory, that disablement then synchronizes with GitHub or any other enterprise applications, and therefore they immediately are blocked from access to all of those resources. Now, some of these may not seem necessarily that important, but there are a lot of social media sites that are in here, such as Aflac. Interesting. I was expecting Twitter. So a lot of social media sites in here, such as Reddit and such as Twitter, that are being utilized by a lot of companies nowadays. And by being able to manage all of those accounts in one central location and change ownership and remove users as necessary with just simply one click is a great way to be able to help control not just your Active Directory and your current corporate environment, but all of the add-on applications you might possibly have. To set these up, well, let's go ahead and look at setting up Twitter. Just simply click on that, the name, how I'm going to sign into it, and then add. That adds it as an application. Later, I can then go into, there we go into Twitter and start managing the properties of it. Who actually owns the Twitter application? Which users can log into it? How do they sign in? Can they simply self-service request access to it? And then also I can view the activities to see who all has been doing anything in my environment. I'm actually going to sign up for this premium trial right this moment, since we're here. Make sure I'm still logged in with my Microsoft. You know what? I'm not going to do that because I don't know if that's necessarily in my test environment. All right, we may have to come back to that one. So, adding applications, there were, oh man, thousands of applications. Let's see, 3,263 applications. Chances are the majority of the applications you're looking for are already out there. You can also configure applications you are currently developing to work with Azure Active Directory. You can have applications that are currently on-premise and utilize a reverse proxy from Azure AD so that your road warriors or remote users can then log straight into your environment. All right. Yes, so through that you can configure license management. Ooh, I forgot about that one. If you have third-party applications that requires licensing per user, such as Salesforce. Through Salesforce.com, or sorry, through Azure Active Directory, you can configure who has access to Salesforce by simply checking a box. You can report on who's accessing that environment, and then the application that was the reverse proxy that allows a user to get into your corporate environment from the internet, allowing them to work as if they're in the corporate office, but from a remote location. All right, so while we're here, organizational relationships, you can specify other organizations to be able to partner with them. So maybe you're partnering with a specific company for a long term or even for a short term. You can go ahead and configure various identity providers in order to work with them so that they can log into your environment and you can log into theirs. Devices, you can do what's called MDM or mobile device management, to where you can configure and manage those devices automatically. So you don't need a third-party tool to be able to manage all of your Android or Apple devices in your environment. App registrations, there's Twitter, identity governance, all right, this one's a new one to me. Yes, definitely read up on identity governance. Application proxy, that was the reverse proxy we were just talking about. Licensing, as you work through the licensed products, you can go ahead and manage them through here. For instance, if you have Office 365, maybe some users have the premium versions of O365, some of them have the basic. So you can go ahead and configure what versions they have right here. Oh, that's the, all right. And then they can also sign up for them. So maybe you have Visio, Microsoft Visio, as an option for your employees, but not everybody needs it. so you can do a self-service sign up and just simply allow them to sign up for Visio if they need it. More mobile device management, password resets. If you're a fully cloud environment, the password reset feature works perfectly through here with little, if any, issues. Otherwise, then you can set up password resets on the more advanced versions of the Azure Active Directory. Company branding, same thing. Put your own login page so that when you go to portal.azure.com, this page can be customized for your own specific needs. Have your company logo on it as necessary. Monitoring. This is where some of the more exciting aspects come in. Again, this requires the more Azure P1 or P2 licensing. This will look through all of the logins in your environment, and it looks for unusual activity. For instance, I took a cruise not too long ago, and my cruise took me down to Mexico, and while I was in Mexico, my phone could not download email. Figure that. I was online, I was on the internet, however, it viewed my activity coming from Mexico as unusual and blocked me. And that's really where these more advanced features come in, of identifying unusual activities and then blocking you automatically. Next, logs. There we go. All right, so still looking for single sign-on. That's not anything that I want. Oh, wait, not single sign-on. MFA. That's what I was looking for. Multi-factor. All right. So I'm not necessarily sure where it is. I would definitely click the documentation here. I'm sure just a quick Google search would be able to help me find that. But it is just that simple to start getting users up and running in your Active Directory Azure